A leading creative software has recently been taking more and more position in the creative industry, particularly in movie making, in game making, in visual effects, in special advertising situations, and it's always been a wonderful tool just to explore your own creativity. Let's go take a look at Blender 2.90.1, which I have just downloaded here from the Blender website. And what I'm going to do here is what I advise you to do as well, is download the DMG file, provided that you're on a Mac. So I'll be talking through the Mac specific process. And I'm also going to talk through as if you do not have admin privileges over your device. Okay, so this works on student laptops. So what we see that just popped up here is essentially the mounted volume window, and it gives you this kind of direction, if you will, by this arrow that you should drag the Blender icon into the applications folder, but don't do that. Yes, don't do that unless you do have the proper administrative privileges to install applications. What I'm going to ask all students to do here is to drag the Blender application icon to the desktop. I'm just going to put it cleanly over here for now. And what will happen at that point, and of course it moves it, go figure. The application is now being copied from the mounted volume. And you can see up here in the top right of my desktop, there is the icon that's indicated I have a mounted volume. If I would open up a new Finder window as well, let's just say I open up a new Finder window over here. Whenever you open up a Finder window, what it does is it gives you this notification on the left hand side of different things that are mounted, and the Blender right here, application mounted volume, is over here on the left. And since I have finished copying from that mounted volume to the desktop, I can go ahead and choose to either eject Blender right here. I'm ejecting the mounted volume. I'm not ejecting the application that I just copied over to the desktop. Another way I could do it is right click over here and eject Blender. Either way, the mounted volume will then be ejected from the system. So I'll do it over here, and then you can watch over here to see what happens. So eject, and then what happens over there, it's gone now. So you want to do that, and then in the downloads, I also want to get rid of the downloaded DMG file. So I'm going to go right over here to this downloaded DMG file, just that DMG file, and then go ahead and get rid of that. Put it in the trash, empty the trash, and so forth. All right, so that's the first order of business, getting the application. And once it's on your desktop, that's fine. Then you can just open it right from there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to expect a window to pop up. Once we click on this, it's going to warn us. It's going to say this has been downloaded from the internet, and we're just going to say okay, because we know what we're doing. We're intentionally doing this process. So it's verifying the application first according to the rules that Mac operating system uses to verify applications. So it says it's downloaded from the internet. Do you want to open it? And yes, we are going to say yes, open it. And now we're going to get our first glimpse here at Blender 2.90.1, and we're going to go through our little get to know you sequence of steps here today. All right, so here it comes, Blender 2.90.1. So nice splash screen. We don't have to go and click around. You're not going to see recent files unless you've already had Blender installed. I'm going to go over here and click off to the side. And we're going to first talk about moving around the application. Specifically, we'll talk about changing the way that you see things in the viewport. So we're going to call this the viewport. It's where you are seeing into a three-dimensional space where you have some control over what is in there and how it looks. So with 2 fingers on the trackpad, just 2 fingers lightly on your trackpad, you can do this kind of motion. Just move your 2 fingers gently around, dragging them on your trackpad, and this is called orbiting the camera. Again, it's done by 2 fingers on the trackpad, just dragging them around, and that's orbiting the camera. And what it does is it's orbiting the camera specifically around this particular point, this point right here with the little orange that you can see right there, that little orange dot. Now that can change if you want to change it. It can actually change. You can reposition that. That's the 3D cursor. So notice also when I select this cube, it becomes outlined in like a tangerine orange color. And when I deselect the cube by clicking off on the outside of it, it loses that tangerine orange highlight. So again, it's important to notice what you have selected. So that's a visual indicator as such. So once again, with 2 fingers on the trackpad, we just go around, and this gives us orbiting the camera. The next thing we're going to do is use 2 fingers on the trackpad again, but now we're going to press the shift key down and hold it. If you hold the shift key down while moving dragging your 2 fingers on the trackpad, that drags the camera, which we call panning. So that pans or drags the camera. You can also say translating or sliding the camera. So there we are, panning the camera with 2 fingers down on the trackpad while holding the shift key. So I'm holding the shift key with 2 fingers down on the trackpad. All right. The next thing, in fact, is going to be a doozy. It's going to be really important in our workflow. And before I do that, I want to draw your attention to this area in the top left. It says Object Mode. There are multiple modes that you can go into. You can see right here there are 6 modes listed. The modes that we're going to be using most often are Object and Edit Mode. So Object Mode is the first mode that you're in when you enter the application, unless you saved a Blender file that was while it was in a different mode. What we're going to do now is press the Tab key and take a look at what happens up here. If I press Tab, it now changes into Edit Mode for the particular thing that I have selected. Now I need something selected, and then if I hit Tab again, that thing goes into Object Mode. So here's my selected item, this cube. If I tap the Tab key, it now becomes that same cube, but now in Edit Mode. All right. So I'm going to tab back into Object Mode. The next thing I'm going to do is point out some things about the top right area here where these circles are. These are little pictures of spheres. This is a view called, this is where you can actually see through. It's like this X-ray mode. And this allows you to select things that are behind faces. So this particular cube, you normally would not be able to see that back corner point or vertex, but if you put it in another mode, like shaded mode right here, then you cannot see that back corner of the cube. So that's important to point out, that that's sometimes useful to go into this X-ray mode whenever you want to maybe drag a box around something and select all of the parts of the thing that are behind different faces. This is our shaded just a basic shading, and this is like the development shading mode, and that's the one that we're going to use. So if you go over here and select this particular one, what it does is it puts it into dev shade mode, which at that point starts to consider what materials that you have, what materials you're using. So if you go down to the right over here and you click on this circle, this is the materials property, or the material properties. So this circle right here opens up a different panel. All of these little tabs open up specific parts of this over this panel on the right. And what we can do here is we can change the material name. I'm just going to double click on that. So I'm going to type in blue because that'll be the color that I'm going to make it. And I'm going to go ahead and change by double clicking over here, or clicking on this. I can just click once, I guess. And I'm going to change it to a bluish color. Now I have a blue material. And we'll add another material here in a little bit, but we're going to change some things around first. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this same cube straight on along this green axis. Now the green axis is what we call the y-axis, and you can look up here in the right, in the top right, where you see these axes, and it says y is the green one, z is the blue one, and x is the red one. So we're going to look along the y-axis, and if I click the y, where it says y up here on the right, it will take me to back orthographic view. If I click the y again, it will flip it around to the front orthographic view. Notice that my cube is not selected now, so if I click on it, now it's selected. And what we're going to do here is we're going to grab the cube and we're going to move it up 1 unit in the z direction, in the positive z direction. So how we do that is we're going to press G for grab, and then Z for the direction that we're going to move it, and then by how much. So I should say G for grab, Z for the axis, and then after that you're going to put a number. A positive number will be in the positive direction, and a negative number would be in the negative direction. We're going to move by 1 in the positive direction, so I am about to type G, Z, 1. So G, Z, 1. And that brings it up. Now I hit return, hit the return key, and that registers that as being done. So now I've finished that. Now if I use 2 fingers on the trackpad, I can look around and see what I've done is I've lifted the cube up onto the XY plane. So when we say the word plane, we're referring to like an infinite surface defined by some identifiable things. In this case, the X and the Y axes together define this infinite. You can imagine it being like an infinite surface that's flat. We're going to call that a plane. We'll also call other things like faces and edges and vertices, and we'll see that here in just a moment. In fact, now that we have the cube selected and that we have lifted the cube up onto the XY plane, we can get into some editing now. So if we tab into edit mode by pressing the tab key, what we'll do is hover over this edge right here that's above the, well, this edge, let's say this edge is one of the edges parallel to the y-axis. So I'm hovering over this edge that's parallel to the y-axis. I'm going to press Control R and hit the number 2 and hit return. Control R, the number 2, and then hit return. Let's talk about what happened there. So Control R, when we were hovering over there, now I got to hit return twice because it didn't register until I hit return twice. And let me actually undo that, and I'll do it again. Command Z. Now I want to add 2 more loops of edges going around this cube, and what we call those are ring cuts. We're going to add 2 ring cuts to this cube along this edge, or kind of perpendicular to this edge. So I'm going to hover over this edge. I'm going to go Control R, that opens up basically the ring cut tool. Now I want to tell it how many ring cuts I want to make. I'm going to press 2 because I want to make 2 ring cuts. Then I'm going to hit the return key twice. If I press it once, then I can drag around the ring cuts if I want to reposition them. So let me do it again. There you go, Command Z. So I'm going to open up the ring cut tool by pressing Control R. Control R opens up the ring cut tool. It defaults to just 1 ring cut, as you can see right there. I'm going to press 2 because I want 2 ring cuts, and I'm going to hit Enter. Now if I move around if I move around the cursor right here, I can actually move those ring cuts back and forth if I want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this again. So that gives you the option. You're in the mode right now where if you want to go ahead and start moving those ring cuts around, you can. Matter of fact, you can start doing, some other things as well. I'm going to undo this by going Command Z. So let me just undo that, and I'll do it over again. Hover over this edge, and I'm going to press Control R, and then the number 2 for 2 ring cuts. I'm going to hit Enter 2 different times, or return. Now I have created 2 ring cuts. I've added more geometry to this cube. Now it's more than a simple cube, and now it has some more geometry involved. So I'm going to now go up to this section up here in the top left, and I'm going to click this button right here, and that button is making the selection be faces. So wherever I click over here, it's going to select the face, and the face is like the flat surface that's on that particular shape or that object. So in this case, you can see what's getting highlighted when I click. It's all those flat surfaces that are on the object. So I'm going to select this particular flat surface right here. I'm going to hold the Shift key down. I'm going to move the camera, pan the camera down a little bit. Right? Already using some of those tools. Now we're going to extrude. We're going to use this new word called extrude, which means to kind of pull out a shape from like this 2-dimensional side. If you want to look at it as kind of like this cross section, we're going to pull it out from a 2-dimensional cross section into 3 dimensions. So as we do that, we are going to evoke the extrude tool by pressing E for extrude. We're going to extrude in the Z direction by 3. So the commands are going to be E, Z, 3. So E brings up the extrude tool. Z, we're going to specify the direction as the Z direction. And then 3, that means 3 units in the positive Z direction. Then we'll hit the Enter key. So what we've done is we've extruded, we've created an extrusion out from one of the faces of that object. So we've extruded one of the faces of that object directly outward. Okay? So now what we're going to do, we still have this face at the top that is selected. We're going to scale it along the y-axis by 2. Scaling is like stretching. You can stretch or you can actually compress. So stretching or compressing, making something bigger or smaller, that's scaling. So to bring up the scale tool, we're going to press S. To identify the direction of scaling, we're going to press Y. And then we are going to press the factor of scaling, which we're going to press 2. Now let me say that all of these tools, if you just want to generally move them around or scale them or extrude them, you can do them without the directional identifier. But most of the time you're more precise by using the directional identifier, and you're less likely to make mistakes. So we're going to go ahead and press S to put it in scale mode, Y for the direction of scaling, and then 2 for the amount of scaling, the scale factor, and then we're going to hit return. Now we have scaled out that particular face of the shape by making it wider, if you will, along the y-axis. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go around with our 2 fingers on the trackpad. We're going to orbit a little bit, and then hold the shift key down and tap, and we're going to select more faces. So holding the shift key down as we go around, using our 2 fingers now to go around, as we select something, we're going to hold the shift key down so it keeps the other selections. What we want to do here is select all of the faces of this object going around the middle. So if you look what I've done here, and what you should do is go around and select all the faces along this middle line. You can think of it like a racing stripe or something. Alright, so now with all of the faces selected around the middle of this object, at this point we're going to be changing the material that's over here. So we're going to actually add another material on the right hand side. So well, let's go do that. On the right hand side, let's go click plus, and that will make a new material slot. Then we're going to click this new button right here to make a new material in that slot. We're going to select the name and give it a name red, and we're going to go down here to the bottom and change that color to like a reddish color. And we're going to do a little bit more than that. We're going to make this like a metallic red. So to make it metallic, we're going to go up to the top and click shading. Click shading up at the top to open up the shading view. The view for the shader nodes. So right down here under this section of the shader nodes view, we can go and move the metallic value over here. We can actually even just type in 1.0 or drag the slider to full metallic. We're going to set the specular value of this the whole way up to 1.0, and we are going to throw the roughness the whole way down to 0.0. We're going to make it perfectly smooth, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to change the metallic to 1, specular to 1, and the roughness to 0. And then we are going to go back to modeling mode, and we're going to go back and look at our material properties again on the right. And now we are going to, with that same selection of faces, now if you've lost your selection of faces, you'll need to go back and reselect all the faces going around the middle of the object. With those selected, you're now going to click assign, and it's going to assign those. But actually, let's go up here and change the shading to dev shading. So if in the top right, you go to the second from the right. So the far right is going to do a lot more intensive shading, like using the lights and so forth to make some more intensive use of your either your CPU, both your CPU and your GPU. We want to keep it in this mode right here, this development shader, which is really easy to use for your computer because it's not nearly as intensive, but it does show you the colors. So we're going to use that. And with, again, this center of faces around this object selected the whole way around, and we select red over here on the right. We're going to then click assign, and now that assigns that metallic red that we've now made, because we defined it as being metallic and specular and all that. Now that is assigned to that particular part, those faces of the object. Now if we take a look at edit mode, but we're going to change the selection type to the selection type. Now we're going to make it edge. So if we click over here to edge select, that's this little line, this little section right here, make it edge select. We're going to select this one edge in the very bottom, and we're going to grab it and move it out by 1 in the positive X direction. So if we go, so on the side of the camera, which is, this is the camera right here, and that's the positive X direction. So if I go over here, if I go G, X, because X is the red axis, GX1, G, X, 1, and I'm going to hit enter. Now I've grabbed and pulled out. So grabbing is different than extruding. We used grab earlier just to lift the box up, and we actually did that in object mode. Here we grabbed an edge and we pulled it out, and it pulled everything else with it. We're going to do the same thing along the back side of this. We're going to select the same, or I should say the mirror edge in the other side. If we click down here in the bottom, we're going to pull that out in the negative X direction by 1. So we're going to go GX negative 1. So GX negative 1, enter. And now we've essentially finished what we're going to do in terms of the modeling today. We're going to save what we've made as training 1. I'm just going to call this training video. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to first of all save this. I'm going to go down here and save it as training underscore video. Yeah, I'll save that. After saving that as a Blender file, now we're going to export it as a GLTF. So I'm going to go over here, File, Export, GLTF, and it will actually be in the binary form of that, which is GLB. So I'm going to go GLTF 2.0, and it's going to export a GLB file, export it to your desktop, and you can choose where to export it over here. Mine's already at the desktop. I'm going to click export. Now that we have exported that, we're going to open up this viewer. If we go back into the browser, we can actually go to this viewer, and it's gltf-viewer.donmccurdy.com, and this is just a nice way to check to see that we exported what we thought we did, to check to see how it looks, to check to see what you have created using Blender, an amazing tool. We've haven't even scratched the surface with what this fabulous software can do. Let's go ahead and click upload, and then we're going to go over to the desktop and training video GLB, and give it a moment, and there it is. It's loaded in, and you can now see that we have our metallic red material wrapping the whole way around, and we have that just basic blue material on the sides. So, and you can see it's also reflecting an environment map that's around the outside of this, with some building and the sun, and looks like some water there. So all of this to get your feet wet with the Blender application, which is very, very powerful, and we'll be looking into it more. But this is your first step. This is what I expect of you. Please reach out if you have any questions. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.